house doesn't look evil. That's the first thing everyone gets wrong. No screaming faces in the windows, no claw marks on the walls, no warning signs. Just a quiet white farmhouse standing alone in the Rhode Island countryside, surrounded by trees that have watched more deaths than any human ever should. And that's exactly what makes it terrifying. Because evil that announces itself is easy to run from. Evil that waits. Evil that blends in. That's the kind that stays with you long after the lights are off. Tonight, I want you to ask yourself something before we go any further. If a house has swallowed generations of suffering, if it has fed on fear, grief, and blood for over 200 years, does it ever really let anyone leave? Because the family you're about to hear about thought they survived. They were wrong. Welcome to DarkLab Story. This is Jake. And tonight, I'm taking you inside the real conjuring house. Not the movie version, not the polished Hollywood nightmare. The real one. And by the end of this story, you may never look at an old house the same way again. Before we begin, do me a favor. If you enjoy true crime mixed with real horror, if you like stories that crawl under your skin and refuse to leave, make sure you like this video and subscribe to DarkLab Story. Because once this story starts, there's no turning back. Now let me take you back to the year 1970, to a family that was searching for peace and found something else entirely. Their names were the Perrons. Roger Perron, his wife Carolyn, and their 5 daughters were tired of city life. They wanted space. Quiet, fresh air, a place where their children could grow up safe. When they first saw the house, it felt like destiny, a massive 14-room farmhouse built in the early 1700s. Wide floors, thick wooden beams, sunlight pouring through old glass windows. The kind of place that felt warm the moment you stepped inside. The realtor didn't mention the deaths. No one ever does. At first, everything felt perfect. The girls ran through the halls laughing. Carolyn imagined family dinners, holidays, memories that would last forever. Roger focused on repairs, on turning the old house into a home, but the house was already occupied. The first sign was the smell. Carolyn noticed it early on. Rotting meat, sulfur, decay, it would come out of nowhere. Then vanish just as fast. They cleaned. They searched for dead animals. They blamed old plumbing. But the smell always came back. Then things began to move. Small things at first. Brooms falling over, doors creaking open after being shut, objects not where they were left. One of the girls complained that something was pulling at her leg at night. Another said she heard whispering in her room when everyone else was asleep. Carolyn told herself it was stress. Moving is hard. Old houses make noise. That's what she told herself, until the bruises started appearing on her body. Deep, dark bruises on her arms and legs. She hadn't fallen, she hadn't bumped into anything. And they hurt. One morning she woke up with marks around her neck, finger-shaped marks. Ask yourself this: if you woke up with fingerprints on your throat, would you stay? Carolyn did, because the house wasn't done introducing itself yet. At night, the girls began seeing shapes, a woman standing in corners, a presence watching them sleep. One daughter refused to enter her bedroom anymore. Another claimed something sat on her chest at night, making it hard to breathe. And then there was the clapping, 2 sharp claps. Always behind you, never in front. Clap, clap. A sound meant to lure children, a sound that makes you turn around. Roger tried to stay calm. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in logic, in stress, in imagination. Until one night he heard footsteps walking through the house while everyone was asleep. Heavy, deliberate, like boots on wooden floors. He grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound, room to room, hallway to hallway. Nothing. But when he returned to bed, the footsteps continued. This is the part most people don't understand. The house didn't attack all at once. It learned them, their routines, their fears, their weaknesses, and then it chose its favorite, Carolyn. She began experiencing something far worse than bruises. She would wake up frozen, unable to move, watching something approach her bed. Not sleep paralysis, because she could scream. And when she screamed, the house screamed back. The girls reported seeing their mother lifted off the bed. Her body arched unnaturally. Her voice wasn't her own. Low, angry, ancient. Let me ask you something. If your mother's voice suddenly changed, if it sounded like someone else was speaking through her, would you believe she was still your mother? Carolyn began researching the land. That was her biggest mistake. The farmhouse had been home to generations of death, suicides, murders, infant deaths. At least 8 generations of the same family had lived and died on that land, many of them violently, and one name kept appearing again and again: Bathsheba, a woman accused of murdering her infant child in the 1800s. She was suspected of sacrificing the baby to Satan. Though she was acquitted, the villagers never forgot. Bathsheba was found dead in the house, her body stiffened in a twisted position. Witnesses claimed her spirit cursed the land. "Death to all who take this land," she was said to have whispered. And now the Perrons were living on it. Carolyn began feeling hatred toward her children, sudden, uncontrollable. She loved them deeply. Yet thoughts of harming them invaded her mind. That terrified her more than anything else. Because evil doesn't always arrive with rage. Sometimes it arrives pretending to be you. The final breaking point came when Carolyn was thrown across the room. Not pushed, thrown. Her body slammed into the wall. Roger saw it happen. No shadows, no tricks. Just his wife lifted and hurled by nothing. That's when they called for help. And that's when the Warrens entered the house. But that's where things become truly unbearable. Because the house wasn't finished feeding. And neither was Bathsheba. If you're still with me, ask yourself one last question before we continue. What would you do if the house you loved wanted your family dead? In the next part, I'll take you inside the investigation, the exorcism, and the moment the house revealed what it truly, when help finally arrived, it didn't come quietly. It never does. 2 cars pulled into the gravel driveway just before sunset. The sky was already turning that sickly orange that comes before night fully settles in. The kind of sky that feels wrong for reasons you can't explain. Carolyn stood at the window watching them arrive. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion. Weeks of terror had hollowed her out. Whatever was in the house had already taken pieces of her, piece by piece. The girls huddled together in the living room. They didn't need to be told something serious was happening. Children know. They always know. When Ed and Lorraine Warren stepped inside, the house reacted. That's not superstition. That's fact. The temperature dropped so fast one of the girls could see her breath. The smell returned, rotting meat, stronger than ever. A pressure filled the air like the house itself was holding its breath. Ed felt it immediately. He later described it as walking into a place that was already watching you walk in. Lorraine didn't speak at first. She stood still, eyes closed, one hand resting against the wall. Her face went pale. "There are many spirits here," she finally said, "but one rules them all. Bathsheba." The name didn't need explanation. Carolyn felt it like a knife sliding down her spine. The Warrens warned them immediately. What was happening in the house wasn't random, it wasn't playful, it wasn't a haunting meant to scare. It was infestation. Something had attached itself to Carolyn, not the house, not the land. Her. The spirit fed on her fear, her stress, her love for her children. It wanted control, total control, and it wasn't planning on sharing. The Warrens decided to conduct a seance. This is where the movie lies to you. A seance is not candles and whispers. It's not dramatic Latin chants. It's quiet, tense, dangerous. They gathered in the living room. The girls were told to leave the house. Roger didn't want Carolyn involved, but she insisted. She said she needed answers. That decision almost killed her. As the seance began, the house changed. The walls started to creak, not old house creaks. Something else, something strained. Like the building was being twisted slowly from the inside. Lorraine began to speak, calling out, asking whatever was present to identify itself. At first, nothing happened. Then Carolyn started laughing. Not her laugh. A low, broken sound that didn't match her face. Her body went rigid. Her head snapped back unnaturally. And then she spoke. "I am the mistress of this house." The voice wasn't female. It wasn't male. It sounded layered, like multiple voices stacked together, scraping against each other. The girl screamed from outside. Carolyn's chair lifted off the ground. Her body slammed against the floor so hard the impact cracked the wood. Roger tried to run to her. He couldn't move. Ed shouted for the spirit to release her. That's when Bathsheba revealed her intention. "She is mine." Carolyn began convulsing violently. Her hands clawed at her throat. Her face twisted with hatred, not toward the Warrens, not toward Roger, toward her children. This is the moment people don't like to talk about, because it's the moment where love fails. Carolyn lunged toward the door, screaming that she needed to finish it. Finish them. Roger broke free and tackled her just as she reached the doorway. It took multiple grown men to hold her down. Lorraine collapsed. She later said she saw Carolyn's future in that moment. Murder, blood, a mother standing over her dead child. The seance was stopped immediately. They didn't cleanse the house, they fled. Let that sink in. The Warrens left. Not because they didn't care, because staying would have made it worse. The house had tasted fear directly. It had tasted resistance. And now it was angry. That night was the worst of all. The girls were too afraid to sleep. They piled into one room, clutching each other, whispering prayers they barely understood. Carolyn sat alone in the dark. She could feel it watching her, not from the walls, from inside her own mind. Thoughts entered that weren't hers, images of knives, of silence after screaming stopped, of peace that came only after everyone else was gone. She bit her tongue until she tasted blood just to stay present. Meanwhile, Roger experienced something he would never forget. He woke up to see a woman standing at the foot of his bed, old, twisted, her neck bent at an unnatural angle. She smiled, and then she vanished. The next morning, the family made a decision. They would leave. They packed only what they could carry. No arguing, no hesitation. As they drove away, one of the girls looked back. She swore she saw figures standing in every window, watching, waiting. Here's the part that never sits right with people. The Perrons survived. They didn't die in the house, but the house didn't let them go. Carolyn suffered for years afterward. Depression, nightmares, sudden fits of rage she couldn't explain. The girls grew up, but every single one of them reported lifelong experiences with the paranormal. Doors opening on their own, shadows in unfamiliar homes, the feeling of being watched, like something had followed them. Because sometimes evil doesn't need a location. Sometimes it just needs permission. The house still stands today. New owners, fresh paint, tours given during the day. But people who stay the night report the same things: footsteps, whispers, clapping, two sharp claps. Always behind you, never in front. So let me ask you something, and don't answer out loud. If a house remembers every scream, every prayer, every death, is it still just a house? Or is it something else entirely? All right, take a breath. Years passed after the Perrons fled the house, but the house never went quiet. That's the lie people want to believe, that when a family leaves, whatever was tormenting them simply fades back into the walls and sleeps. That time heals places like this. It doesn't. It waits. The farmhouse changed owners more than once after the parents left. Some stayed months. Some barely lasted weeks. A few didn't even make it through a single night. What's chilling is how consistent the experiences were. Different people, different beliefs, different decades, same phenomena. The first night was always calm, peaceful, even comforting. Owners would later say the house felt protective, like it was wrapping itself around them. That's how it hooks you. Then came the sounds, footsteps when no one was awake, heavy steps, purposeful, not wandering, not lost, something walking with intent. Doors opened slowly in the middle of the night, hinges groaning like they were being pulled apart inch by inch. People woke up standing in rooms they didn't remember walking into. And then there were the voices, not loud, whispered, right next to your ear. People reported hearing their names spoken in familiar voices, mothers, fathers, spouses who weren't there. Let me ask you something. If you heard your own name whispered in the dark, would you answer? One man did. He followed the voice down the stairs and into the basement. That basement, the dirt floor, the stone walls, the place where the air feels heavier, like gravity works differently down there. He said the moment he stepped onto the last stair, he felt pure hatred hit him like a wave. Not fear, hatred. As if something resented the fact that he was alive. He ran back upstairs screaming and never returned. Then came the investigators, not paranormal tourists, not thrill seekers, professionals, people with cameras, audio equipment, night vision, motion sensors. They came in skeptical. They left shaken. Audio recordings captured voices that didn't belong to anyone present, clear, angry, mocking. One voice repeated a single phrase over and over, "Get out!" Another voice laughed, low, wet, like it was coming from a throat that wasn't meant to speak anymore. Thermal cameras picked up cold spots that moved against airflow patterns, shadows that appeared where nothing physical existed. And always, the clapping, 2 sharp claps. Investigators tested it. One person would clap twice. The sound was mimicked from another room seconds later. Sometimes closer, sometimes right behind them. One investigator turned around during a session and froze. On camera, you can see his face drain of color. Later, he admitted he felt hands grab his shoulders. Hands that weren't there. Then there are the dreams. Almost everyone who spends a night in the house reports the same thing. A woman. Her neck bent unnaturally, her eyes full of rage, her presence crushing. She stands at the foot of the bed. She doesn't move. She doesn't speak. She just watches. And when people wake up, they find bruises, finger-shaped, just like Carolyn did. One guest woke up screaming, convinced someone was standing on his chest, pushing the air out of his lungs. Another woke up with scratches across his back, 3 deep lines perfectly parallel. No explanation, no animals, locked doors. This is where the story turns darker. Because the house doesn't just scare people, it influences them. People report sudden mood changes while inside, anger, paranoia, thoughts that don't feel like their own. One woman broke down crying uncontrollably for hours without knowing why. A man became irrationally aggressive toward his partner, screaming accusations that made no sense. The house doesn't just haunt, it manipulates, just like it did with Carolyn, just like it wanted to finish. Here's the detail most documentaries avoid. The house doesn't feel chaotic. It feels organized, like there's a hierarchy, multiple spirits, one authority, the mistress of the house, Bathsheba, Whether she was a murderer, a witch, or simply a focal point for something far older doesn't matter anymore. What matters is this: something wears her name, something uses her face, and it has no intention of leaving. Even today, caretakers refuse to sleep in certain rooms. Visitors are warned not to provoke, not to mock, not to challenge, because those who do often regret it. Objects thrown, equipment destroyed, sudden illnesses, unexplained injuries. One visitor laughed during a tour and said out loud, "If something's here, prove it." That night, he woke up with bruises around his throat. He never laughed again. Now let me ask you the question no one can answer. Why that house? Why that land? Was it Bathsheba? Or was she just the first victim? What if the land itself is cursed? What if the house is just a vessel? Because long before Bathsheba, long before the Paranormal, people died there, and they didn't leave peacefully. So here we are, a house that still stands, a story that never ended, a place that doesn't care whether you believe or not, because belief was never required, only presence. And if you're listening to this right now, late at night, alone, pay attention to the sounds behind you. If you hear two sharp claps, don't turn around. In the final part, I'll tell you what former owners refused to speak about publicly, what happened to people who tried to cleanse the house, and why some doors inside are never opened anymore. There is a moment every investigator talks about in private, not on camera, not in interviews, only in quiet conversations long after they've sworn never to return. It's the moment when the house stops reacting and starts responding. One former caretaker described it like this: "At first it felt like we were disturbing something. Later it felt like it was adjusting to us." That distinction matters, because disturbing something implies it was asleep. This wasn't. The house learned patterns, it learned voices, it learned who was afraid and who pretended not to be. And once it learned you, it changed how it treated you. One investigator noticed that equipment failures followed a routine. Batteries drained only in certain rooms. Cameras shut off when pointed toward specific corners. Audio recorders captured silence, except for breathing that no one could hear in real time. Breathing that matched no human rhythm. Slow, measured, patient. During one overnight stay, 3 people independently wrote the same sentence in their notes without discussing it beforehand. It feels like something is waiting for permission. Think about that. Not attacking, not hunting, waiting. Permission doesn't always come from belief. Sometimes it comes from fear, sometimes from curiosity, sometimes from arrogance, sometimes from staying too long. That's why the house doesn't need to lock its doors. People walk deeper inside willingly. One night, a guest wandered into the basement alone. No reason, no curiosity he could explain. He later said it felt like a suggestion, not a command. Just a quiet thought that didn't feel like his own. Go downstairs. As soon as his foot touched the dirt floor, every light in the house went out. Not flickered, out. In the darkness, he heard footsteps circle him slowly, not rushing, not hiding, claiming space. He felt a hand press against his back, hard enough to leave a mark. When the lights returned seconds later, he was alone. He left the house before sunrise and never spoke about what he felt in that moment. Only what he thought. A thought that terrified him more than anything physical. It could have done worse. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. If the house wanted bodies, there would be bodies. What it wants is something harder to see. Submission, acknowledgement, fear carried forward. The Paranormal family didn't escape untouched. The house lived on inside them, in their dreams, in their instincts, in the way they reacted to shadows decades later. That's how the story spreads. Not through deaths, through survivors. And that's why the house is still there, still standing, still active, still patient. People ask whether Bathsheba is truly there. Here's the honest answer. Something answers to that name. Something wears her story, but whatever controls that house is older than one woman, older than one family, older than the walls themselves. Bathsheba may have been the voice, but the land is the mouth, and it is still open. So here's my final question for you. If a place remembers you, if it recognizes your fear, if it learns how to reach you, does leaving really mean escape? Or does it just mean the haunting changes location? If you're listening to this late at night, if the house is quiet, if the darkness feels a little heavier than it should, don't panic, just listen. And if you hear two sharp claps, don't answer. This is Jake. You've been listening to DarkLab Story. If this story stayed with you, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves real horror. Because some stories don't end when the video does, they wait. And this one is very good at waiting. Before you click away, just sit with that feeling for a second. That quiet heaviness. That sense that something followed this story out of the dark. That's not an accident. That's why DarkLab Story exists. Because some stories don't scream. They whisper, and they stay with you. If this one made you uncomfortable, if it made you check the shadows behind you, if you felt that moment where your chest tightened and you didn't know why, then you're exactly where you belong. Subscribe to DarkLab Story, not because you're brave, but because you're curious enough to listen when most people look away. New true crime and real horror stories drop here. Stories based on real places, real people, and things that were never supposed to be uncovered. And one last thing. If you heard something while this was playing, if your room suddenly felt too quiet, don't panic. Just make sure you're not listening alone next time. This is Jake. You're watching DarkLab Story, and I'll see you in the dark.